Hi, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about all the books I read in May. I completed 17 books this month and DNF'd 3. 2 of those are like for sure I probably will never read them again, and one of them I think was just right book, wrong time. Yeah, you know what? Let's start there. Alright, so the one that's right book, wrong time was actually one of my mashed potato books. When I made my May TBR, I talked a little bit about mashed potato May and the concept of it in that video, but essentially in the short, it was created by Ariel and Raylene from Books Unbound, and it's just meant to encourage you to read books that have been on your backlist for a very long time. Maybe they've been on your TBR because you've been intimidated by them, or maybe you've just been waiting for the right time to enjoy them. Mashed potato May. This was one of the books for me. It's The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X. Arpan. I have physically had this book since 2017, 2018. Let's see what this says. This was a March 2018 Book of the Month pick, so I've had it at least since then. It's been on my TBR this whole time. It deals with grief. This young girl, I think she's 15, when her mom passes away after a lifelong, I'm assuming, struggle with depression and maybe some other mental illness. She takes her own life, and her daughter comes home and finds her, which is horrific. And it's us watching her try to deal with that. Her mother was an immigrant from Vietnam, I think, or maybe Taiwan. Her mother is a Taiwanese immigrant, and her dad is American, and so now she is left with her father, who has done like a lot of Asian studies and things. I got about halfway through this book, but we didn't get very far into like his infatuation with Asian culture, because I feel like that's a conversation. But it was more about her feeling this lost connection to her mother. They never talked about her mom's family or what back home meant to her mom most of the time, because it made her mom incredibly sad. And her mom was so dependent on her dad, not only like financially, obviously, and just for living in America, but you could just tell emotionally she was very dependent on him, and he worked a lot, and when he would work a lot, her mom would just go into just this gray cloud. It was really tough. I really struggled because of the writing style. I think it was just the wrong time for me to try to pick this up. I tried to read it physically, struggled, got the audiobook, and that helped some, but I would just find myself getting lost and not really knowing where we were in the story. There's a lot of magical realism in here. The daughter believes her mother has been reincarnated as a bird and is sending her messages. And that part was the easiest part, honestly, to grasp. There was just a lot of secondary stories. Some that I can't tell if like some of them happened in the past and you can tell it's just her retelling stories of her mother. Others felt more like wistful and imaginative. And none of the things are bad. The writing was gorgeous. I just wasn't in the place to enjoy it, so I've temporarily put it down, but I think I will pick this back up again. This thing's also a chunker, if you can see. It's like a 500-page book, which is kind of wild for YA, to be quite honest. Well, it used to be. Maybe not so much now. I should say wild for YA for a non-fantasy book. I don't know. But I struggled with that. The other 2 books I DNF'd were, I don't have physical copies of these to show you, but Sociopath by Patrick Gagne. This is a nonfiction book that is meant to give us a look into the life of a woman who is a diagnosed sociopath and like does not have criminal behavior and things that we tend to associate with that diagnosis. I struggled with this because I think part of this is my fault. I got really excited when I saw it on Libro FM's ALC program because I had heard other people talking about it, and I absolutely love nonfiction about mental health that is not in a clinical setting. I think just because I struggle with it on my own, it's kind of nice to see it lived out and what that looks like for different people. And I think where I really struggled with this one is that Patrick Gagne is a Nepo baby, which I am not going to hold against her. She didn't ask to be born into the family she was born into. But her writing drips with Nepo baby behavior. It's very, look at me. It's very poor little rich girl. nothing about this was relatable. And I don't need to be in the same socioeconomic status with you for you to be a relatable person. I have read many a celebrity memoir where they are struggling internally with reconciling poor behavior and their mental health and like trying not to have that be an excuse for it and things like that, and like actually struggling with that. I can deal with that and I can relate to a lot of that because I also have times where I have to reconcile that just because I'm mentally in a bad place doesn't mean that I get to behave like an asshole. I think that's a normal thing for adults to deal with, regardless of your upbringing, regardless of your social status. But just so much of this felt like I was being told I was being given a real, genuine, honest, raw story, but I'm being given perfectly packaged shit. And it's a no for me, dog. I can't do it. The other one I DNF'd because honestly, I never would have picked this up on my own. I texted a friend late one night because I had just gotten done reading, I think, a string of just very comforting contemporary romances. And I was like, man, I'm in the mood for dark romance. I kind of want a mafia book. And she's like, does it have to be mafia? I said, no. And so she sent me this. And then I got like halfway through and I was skimming a lot. And I was like, I don't actually want this. And so I put DNF'd. And that's Phantom by Greer Rivers. There was nothing overtly wrong with this book. I think it was just me looking for something very specific and this book didn't have it, and so I put it down. I also just like don't care about Phantom of the Opera, and that's the story is loosely based on that, and it's just not my thing. It's not my thing. So those are my DNFs for the month. Let's talk about the books that I finished and enjoyed. First up was All on the Line by Lo Everett. I don't have that physical copy with me. I do have Calling It Safe. This is the third book in that series. I love this series. I loved this book so much. I read the second book, All or Nothing, this past summer, or this past fall. Absolutely had a great time with it. And so after reading this, I was like, man, I should go back and read the first book. Why haven't I read the first book? And so I did. I had a good time with it. It is not as good as the other ones. I'm sorry. Lo, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I just didn't enjoy it as much as the first two that I read. But it's good. I'm not going to say it's a bad book or anything. It's definitely not that. I can just tell that she's found her stride, I think is more so what it is. And I love that. This is so weird to say, but I love when the first book in the series doesn't necessarily hit for me, and then the second and the third ones do. And the reason they hit is because things that I didn't love in the writing or in the decision making on how the story would progress have been updated to fit not only things that I enjoy, but what feels true to the author. Like, as I was reading All on the Line, I could see her trying to find her way and how she wanted these characters to develop, how she wanted them to grow individually as well as together. And I could see, you could just see where some choices were made along the way in the story progression that I didn't see those same struggles when I read All or Nothing or Calling It Safe, which is great. So I gave that one 4 stars. So actually, funnily enough, after I DNF'd that Phantom of the Opera-esque dark romance, I actually picked up a mafia romance and it hit the spot. It's When She Falls by Gabrielle Sands. It's the third book in the series. I have not read the first two. The first book I read in the series was actually the fourth one. And so I was very confused when I picked this up because I looked at the cover and I was like, I've seen this cover before. And it's because they're all jewel tone covers. I loved that fourth book so much. So I went back to read the third one. This is actually the one mafia series you should probably read in order. I made that mistake. I probably won't go back and read the first two, or if I do, I'll have to intentionally read them back to back so that I don't confuse myself each time again. But I had a great time. This is about... I actually don't remember what this is about. I was just looking at the synopsis, and even reading this, I'm like, I don't remember this. I just remember there's this guy who's in the mafia, and I think he's trying to take somebody down. Like, I think he infiltrated their organization, maybe. Anyway, he meets this boss's daughter. He falls for her instantly. He can't have her, and in the end, he does anyway. And I just remember it being very chaotic, but very good. Very enemies to lovers-esque. I feel like she hated him for, like, 40% of the book. But after that, it went well. Next up was a 5-star read for me that I've already talked about in a previous video, so I won't spend too much time on it, but that is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. Queen Kennedy can do no wrong. I just had the greatest time with this. It is listed as a romance, but it's more contemporary fiction with a romantic bend to it. We follow Soledad, who is dealing with newly becoming a single mother because her ex-husband, or soon-to-be ex-husband, was embezzling money from his company and has landed himself in jail. She also finds out some other terrible misgivings about his behavior, and it leads her to question, honestly, everything about herself, and then realize that there was never anything wrong with her and he was always the problem. Through that process, she meets Judah, who was the forensic accountant. That's the word. He was a forensic accountant at the firm her husband worked at, and actually discovered his poor behavior and then helped his company get his money back and get that guy in jail. So of course you would think Soledad and Judah have no business being together, but girl, yes they do. Yes they do. And it was great when they finally were together, but the journey of her finding herself and realizing that she truly could stand on her own 2 feet, what brought to me so much joy and was just done so well. And then the romance was just icing on top of the cake. Can't recommend that enough. After that, I read Learn Your Lesson by Candy Steiner. This is the 3rd book in the Kings of the Ice series. And I had an okay time with this one. I gave it 3.5 stars. I don't know if I enjoy Candy Steiner writing professional sports romances, like professional hockey romance in particular. This is the 3rd book in the series. Only one of them has truly worked for me, and I don't know. I'll probably continue on because I can't. Even like a mid Candy Steiner book for me is a good time. Like, I enjoy reading it. It just doesn't always make me like super excited. This is about a hockey captain who is a single dad. His wife passed away after being ill for some time, and he's trying to figure out how to be a single dad in a job that has you traveling upwards of 3 to 5 days a week at times, being there for his daughter and making sure she doesn't feel abandoned. And it was just very sweet. This woman comes in and ends up nannying for him, and he just keeps telling himself, like, I cannot hook up with my nanny. That's been a historic problem where the women he's hired come in and they are like, oh yeah, we're gonna take such good care of your kid. Also, can I suck your dick? And he's like, whoa. I need you to take care of my child, not get in my pants. And so her teacher actually becomes her nanny because she shows up at the rink one day with his daughter because his nanny never showed up to pick her up. And she's like, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. He's like, it's fine. Like, thank you for bringing her. Also, I will pay you a fuck ton of money to watch her every day after school if you absolutely would mind. And then she ends up actually moving into like his pool house or something and being in there. And so, of course, there's forced proximity. Things are happening as it goes. Most of this story worked for me. There were just a few things here and there that felt rushed or convenient and just didn't make a ton of sense to me. I also had a really hard time with the 3rd act conflict in this book. It just, honestly, it was kind of disappointing to see that happen, given how present and emotionally mature Will is in other areas of his life. But men can't all be perfect, so 3.5 stars for that one. Alrighty, the next book is Balance by Lucia Franco, and TBH, this should have been a DNF. I did not rate this. I won't rate this. It's about a gymnast who is like 17 and is begging her parents to take her seriously. She is from a very wealthy, well-off family, and her dad agrees to take her to a gym that takes Olympic training seriously. And he only agrees to this because he's very overprotective of her. He only agrees to this because he knows the coach at the gym. Long story short, girl goes to gym, girl finds coach hot, coach finds girl hot, coach and girl hook up. And it's a thing. When I started this, because she kept talking about how she was old for a gymnast, I thought this was going to be a, I don't know, Simone Biles, Gabby Douglas, can you believe we're in our 20s still doing this kind of thing? That's what I thought was going to happen going into the story. The only reason I picked it up. I very much thought like, oh, she's going to be like a 22-year-old gymnast, like trying to still compete with like you know, the 16 and 17-year-olds you see at the Olympics all the time, and then she's going to have a cute little coach romance going along the way. No, that was not the thing. So I was not having a good time. I should have DNF'd this expeditiously. Part of the reason I didn't, I think, is just because of the amount of pages. It was a 610-page book. And I was like 425 pages in when like things started happening. I was like, I'm so far in now, I'm just going to finish it. And I did, and I wish I hadn't, to be quite honest with you. After finishing Balance, I needed a real win, so I picked up Seeing Red by Bailey Hanna. This is the second book in the Wells Ranch series, and it follows Cassidy Bowman and Chase Red Thompson. Now, if you've read Alive and Wells, you know all about Chase Red Thompson. That boy has a bad reputation. Cassidy is back in her hometown, living with her dad, and her butthole of an ex is the worst. He left her, I believe he was cheating on her, and she's out at the rodeo one night with her friends, and she sees him with his new girl. And he approaches her, and they have a weird interaction. And afterwards, she goes back to the table with her friends, and Red is at the table as well. And she looks at him and playfully is like, you want to bang on top of my ex's car? Because I would absolutely love to get back at him. And he's like, girl, you were so crazy. And he's like, oh shit, you're serious? Let's go. That happens. Well, Cassidy gets pregnant accidentally from this. And I am not one for the accidental pregnancy trope, but this was done so well. Red has so much depth to him that I don't think anyone really ever knew. He is head over heels for this girl, and she has no intentions of letting him be like a present boyfriend. That's not what she went into this for. She doesn't want that. But he chips away at her exterior. He brings her like 4 different ways of eating a potato because she loves that. They call their baby Spud, as it's in utero, and they're dealing with all of that. And it was just a very sweet romance. It was such a sweet little cowboy romance. I absolutely loved how they both just gave each other a ton of grace. She really gave him a chance, honestly. His dad had a reputation for being abusive and an alcoholic, and Red has always had an issue with being rowdy, and people just assumed he's just like his father, when all he wants is to be the complete opposite of that man. And so getting to see him show up for her and essentially just prove by action that that's just not who he is was great. There was some conflict around town, just like with her dad and some other guys, and as you're reading, you're just like, man, don't fuck it up, man. Don't fuck it up, man. And so it's just, it's hard not to root for them. It was so good. I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to give it away. And everything I did say is like in the author's advertisements of the book and on the back flap. So there were like no real spoilers there. It's such a sweet romance. I couldn't recommend it enough. Honestly, I had the best time. I think I read this all in one day. I couldn't help myself. And then after that, I went back to my hockey romance roots. And I read Odd Man Rush and Puck Pact by Kristen Granado. Those are 2 different books. Odd Man Rush is a FFM romance, actually. It's about, I forget the characters' names. I'm so bad at that. So there's the main woman in this book is married to is he a goalie, or maybe he's a defenseman on this hockey team that we followed. This is the second book in the series, and they have a wonderful relationship. That man would give her the world, and honestly kind of has. They were high school sweethearts, but they were going to 2 separate colleges on different sides of the country, and they broke up. He wanted to stay in a long distance relationship. She did not. They break up. She is rooming with their other best friend, because all 3 of them were best friends in high school, who's a girl. And they have this whirlwind romance through college. But the first girl, who's married to the guy now, has always had an issue accepting her sexuality, mostly for fear of how her parents would react. Her dad is aggressively conservative, very religious, and she just knows like he would not be welcoming of that, and her fear of their rejection stops her from loving her partner out loud. So when college is over, they break up. She goes back to the East Coast she runs into her ex-boyfriend and best friend. They get back together, they get married, and that's where the story picks up, is us seeing them married and seeing their second best friend pop back up. She has been doing PR for different players for years, and she gets transferred, I think, to their team, or she's doing PR for somebody on their team. I can't remember. Anyway, all three of them kind of end up back together, and they end up together in more ways than one. And it's really just them navigating that and them trying to help the first FMC accept herself and who she is, and knowing that even if her parents don't, that they will be there for her. It was a good time. I gave it 3 stars. I feel like the execution was a little rough, but overall it was a fun story. And then Puck Pact did everything for me that Learn Your Lesson didn't. This is another single dad romance. I think another goalie. It follows Alexander Crum, who is a single dad, and no one knows on his team. He's kept his daughter a secret, not because he's ashamed of her or anything like that, but because he doesn't like how famous he is in the hockey world and kind of outside of it. People around the town know who he is. He does not want people photographing his daughter. He wants to protect her for as long as possible. His estranged grandfather has updated his will to leave a family villa that used to be his parents. His parents have passed away, to him, but the condition is he has to be married for, I think, it doesn't even give a certain time frame, but he has to essentially be married, have a family, for this to come to fruition for him. So he's looking for a fake wife. He finds that fake wife in I'm trying to think of how he knows this woman. I can't remember. Oh, you know what? I think they met at one of the team galas or something. She's friends with one of the girls from the last book, and she kind of throws herself at him at this like team dinner thing. And he is very into her, but he has his daughter at home, and he's like, I can't take you home. I'm sorry. And she's never really been turned down like that before and does not really know what to do with it. They run into each other a few other times. I can't remember what her main conflict was, but she also needed a place to stay, and she needed something. And he proposes to her, and he's like, hey, let's enter into this fake arrangement. I would really appreciate it if you lived here full time. Like, we need to look like we're actually married for me to get my family villa back. And she agrees. She also kind of becomes his daughter's nanny as well. And God, there's so much more to this story, but I don't want to spoil anything. Their chemistry was phenomenal. The way the daughter was incorporated into the story was great as well. It wasn't too much, wasn't too little. The kid wasn't written to be like overly precocious. It was wonderful. I couldn't have asked for a better time. I also really liked that our FMC she's not naturally maternal at all, and honestly is kind of scared of taking care of his kid, but like a healthy amount of scared. And so it was just really fun to watch that happen in like a non-traditional person, I guess you could say, like coming into this situation. Like, you would not expect her, if you knew her throughout the story, to be volunteering to have a kid, and she is. And I don't know, I absolutely loved everything about that story. It was, neither of them were the type to really, well, I take that back. He was very pro-commitment and was not the kind of guy to like have one night stands. She is anti-commitment, only wants that. So watching them both learn not only about each other, but about what they truly wanted and how they wanted their lives to look, it was great. I was so swept up in that book. I think I also read that one in one day. These next two were for Mashed Potato May. I went back to that and was like, man, I really need to read some books off my TBR. So I read The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi by S.A. Chakraborty. And I had a really good time with this. I did struggle with reading this. I want to say it took me a week, maybe 2 weeks to read it. And it's because I listened to the audio and it was great. We're following a retired pirate who is asked to essentially do one last job. I love a one last job mystery, thriller, fantasy, whatever, adventure kind of story. And she's doing this one last job because it is asked of her by the mother of one of her previous shipmates who passed away in a way that she believes is her fault. We don't know how or why that happened in the beginning. We just know that this thing happened. And so she feels obligated to say yes. It's also a shit ton of money. Through the process of the story, we learn how he passed away, what happened. She's a daughter at home that not many people know about, and we come to understand why she's scared for people to know about her child and what that could mean for her life, and some other questionable and fantastical elements that are going on as well. I gave this book 4 stars because the middle kind of sludged on for me. Took me a week to read, which is not normal for me. And it wasn't because I was trying to take it slow. I just didn't want to pick it up at certain points. But then once I got past that maybe 5 chapter hump, I was sold again and I was completely in it. After that, I read something that I wish had been a very good time for me, but it was only a 3 star. And I feel like that 3 star might have been kind of generous, and that's Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. I didn't like it. I wanted to like it a lot. And it was fine. It was fine. It wasn't great. And that makes me sad. It's so hard to pinpoint exactly why this didn't work for me. Because I love a hockey romance. I love a figure skater tie-in. It was nice to see 2 competitive athletes understand that about each other and have a good time with each other. But it just didn't feel believable for a lot of it. In fact, our figure skater's hooking up with another athlete in the beginning of this book before these 2 get together. I wanted that way more. I enjoyed their connection way more. I was so bored by this, and it just wasn't what I wanted. Am I still going to read Wildfire? Absolutely, because my friend told me, she's like, I don't think you're like Icebreaker, but I think you're going to love Wildfire. So I am going to give that a shot and just hope that this is the one miss in the series, but damn, was it a miss. I'm sorry. Don't sue me. I don't like it. I read The Problems with Players by Brittany Cherry after this. This is my first Brittany Cherry book. I had a great time. I had such a great time. This book told me all about myself because let me tell you, as a parentified eldest daughter with depression and anxiety, I know you've heard that before. This was for me. We follow a female coach whose name is escaping me at this moment. She's a high school baseball coach. She'd been an assistant and the head coach has retired. He was an utter douchebag and just shat over all of her ideas. And so she's super excited to come in and be the head coach, except her ex-beau from the summer between high school and college comes back to town. That man played in the MLB. He's back because his father has passed away. His mom is running the family farm, and I think she was kind of struggling, and so he's like, man, I love that family farm. I want it to succeed. So he comes back to help her and his brothers make sure that that's running well. They also have a butcher business or something as well, and so he's just trying to make sure all this is successful, but he really misses the game of baseball. So he decides, I want to help out. I'm going to go help out at the high school. Well, the principal goes, hell yeah, you are. You're the new head coach. Also, and he's like, okay. I think the girl's name was Avery, I'm pretty sure. And he's like, is Avery okay with this? And then he's like, yeah, she's great. Plot twist, no one fucking told Avery. Sprung it on her in the meeting. Goes terribly, as you would expect. Also, Avery is engaged to a rocket scientist or something. I don't know. He seems nice enough on paper, but he has no connection to her. She has no connection to him. And the whole time you're like, why are these 2 together? And so that's the conflict. Avery also struggles to physically get out of bed in the morning. And when she does get out of bed, she makes it to work, but she just has no energy to put forward. And she's just in this really ugly bout of depression, and she doesn't know why. She doesn't know what's going on. So she's dealing with this. She's dealing with a fiance who thinks he's being really present, but is actually pretty distant. There's also a conflict that's going on there, a little other woman drama, but kind of not in the way you would think, but a little bit it is. Then she's at work. Nothing's going smoothly there because the principal's like, get on board with him being the head coach or get the fuck off this train. Which is shitty. At least Nathan, the MC who comes in, is like, hey, if he wants it on paper, fuck it, that's fine, whatever. But, like, just know, like, you're the head coach. I'm here to help you. I'm here to do whatever. Like, I have no ulterior motives. I just want to be around baseball. And she is loathing him being around, really struggling with that, but she's like, fine, whatever. Their relationship blossoms in the best way. That man is relentless when it comes to her, and I absolutely loved it. If you've ever wanted to read a story about a woman who has had to carry it all, finally meet someone who just, like, wants to make her life just a little bit easier. Doesn't want to stop her from doing what she needs to do. Just wants to make it a little easier for her. This is the book for you. It was a great time. A great time. There were just a few things in the writing elements that weren't really working for me, and that's why I gave it 4 stars. But overall, it was a very good time. After that, I went on a little mafia romance spree because at the end of the month, I was burnt out. I just was. And that's what I did. I picked one up on a Friday. It was Memorial Day weekend, and I literally read 1 to 2 books every day Memorial Day weekend. It was kind of nuts. I'm just going to rattle off the titles, authors, and the star rating because, truth be told, I don't remember a ton about any of these. So, first up was Corrupted Heart by Jagger Cole. I gave that 4 stars. Then there was Ruthless Stranger by Maggie Cole. I gave that 4 stars. Then there's Savage Little Games and Ruthless Little Games, both by Lane Hart. I gave those 3 and 3.5 stars respectively. And then I ended the Memorial Day weekend with a little novella called Dead to Sin by Jenna Black that I gave 3 stars. Last but not least, I read The Brightest Light of Sunshine by Lucina Coney. This is my last Mashed Potato May book of the month. Even though it wasn't on my original TBR, I have been looking at this book essentially since it came out in 2023, which is not a very long time for a mashed potato book, but I just never picked it up, and then I finally did. This follows Grace Allen, who has a really traumatic past. She is trying to deal with that. She's away at college and runs into Cal, who is a tattoo artist who owns a tattoo shop in town. He's a little older than her. I think he's 30. She initially comes in and is like, I really want to get this tattoo. He's like, great. And she freaks out about it and leaves. And he's like, hey, come back whenever you want. We'll draw it out. We'll talk about placement. We'll talk about what the experience will look like. Like, you don't have to be forced into this. I want you to want to do this. She's like, okay, thanks. So her friends are trying to get her to, like, dip her toes into the dating pool to try to overcome some of her trauma. She's not having a great time doing any of that, but she agrees to go to parties with them and try to meet boys and do whatever. They are very protective of her and are very respectful of her boundaries. Like, none of them are trying to, like, get her to, like, immediately hook up with a guy because her trauma is SA related. But they're like, you should try to get comfortable just talking to a guy that you, of your choosing, like, that you're comfortable with, but also know that we are literally here in the room. So, like, if anything gets weird, like, we will help you, like, leave, do whatever. Like, we're not gonna abandon you. Which I really appreciated that because I've read in some past books where, like, you have, like, a wallflower type girl who's, like, the roommate and her wild best friend's like, we're gonna get you laid, like, let's go out, and then just kind of, like, leaves her, and you're just like, that girl has no confidence when it comes to men. Why would you leave her with the wolves? So I appreciated that that didn't happen. Although at one of the parties, she's there, and she runs into her cousin, who's a male cousin who recently graduated from college, and it's one of the reasons she chose the college is because he's there, and so she just kind of always has somebody kind of looking out for her. They walk out into, like, a back area, and he has to leave, and she's like, it's cool, I'm gonna go back in and find my friends, or I'll call an Uber. And he's like, okay. And he really doesn't want to leave her, but he owns a restaurant, and there's, like, an emergency situation happening, and so he leaves. This guy comes out and is talking to her, and he's like, don't I know you? You're in my class, whatever. And she's like, I don't think so, but whatever. And she's doing that thing where she's trying to be polite, but she's also looking for an out. And he's being a little aggressive, but, like, not overly so. And then Cal is suddenly there, and he's just like, hey, the girl said no, back the fuck up. And he waits with her, she gets an Uber because she refuses to get a ride home with him. And he's so respectful of that. And it's just like, cool, whatever makes you comfortable, but I'm also not comfortable just leaving you here. So I will see you into your Uber, and then I will go. And you'll go, and it'll be fine. And she's like, okay. I think at some point that he gets her number and they, like, are texting because he's like, hey, I really want to make sure you get home, okay? Like, I'm not going to, like, stalk you or anything. Just, I want to make sure you're home okay. And she knows that he's best friends with her cousin, so she feels pretty comfortable around him. And it's just a lot of that. She is that's what it is. She's in ballet. Absolutely loves it. She's teaching at the local ballet school. And his little sister goes to that ballet school and absolutely loves Grace. And through a series of several events, they continue to hang out. She gets to know the little sister some. And they have this whirlwind romance that is just really beautiful. I don't often love age gaps. Excuse me, as I've said in previous books, but this one in particular really worked for me. I think it helps that he's only 8 years older than her, which like is a lot of time, but isn't a lot of time. I think specifically because of her trauma, it was really nice to see her with a guy who is a bit older and understands why boundaries are important. He has his own about certain things. And he just immediately made her feel safe the whole time. And that was super important, not only to her, but then also me as a reader. I loved it. I had the best time. I gave this 4 stars. There were just certain elements that felt, I don't know, kind of repetitive, kind of weird. I did really enjoy, actually, the third act conflict in this one. A thing happens that you can kind of tell is going to happen from the beginning of the book. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It actually doesn't have anything to do with Grace. It has to do with Cal and his sister. But, the thing happened, you kind of know it's going to happen pretty early on. Like, you can just kind of tell there's a lot of foreshadowing to it. And the reason I really like the conflict is because I think it's really realistic for that situation. But it's not a breakup. I won't call it that. So if third act breakups aren't your thing, it's okay. That's not what happens here. It just made a lot of sense. And it was nice to read a romance that made a lot of sense. And where at the end of the book, I actually believed that this couple would still be together. Wild, I know. So those are the 17 books that I read in the 3 DNFs. And yeah, I had a great time this month. I'm already on a roll for the month of June. I have had a great reading weekend. I've finished like 2 or 3 books already, which is kind of wild. It's been a good time, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. So I will see you in another video soon.